Hey there, Twins fans. My name is Seth Stoas of Twins Daily, twinsdaily.com, welcoming you to another edition of Twins Spotlight. Had to postpone a couple of shows last week. As you can tell, my voice is better, but it's certainly not what it normally is. So hopefully within another week or so, I'll be back to normal. But the show must go on, right? So today we're gonna go with Twin Spotlight. It's episode 49, might be 48 actually. Episode 13 of this season. We've had some great guests so far. We've been joined by Jose Miranda and Simeons Woods Richardson and several other Twins prospects. We've also been joined by Sean Aronson, the head broadcaster of the St. Paul Saints. We've been joined by Tim Grubbs, the broadcaster for the AA Wichita Wind Surge. And today, our guest, if I do this correctly, is the broadcast voice of the Fort Myers Mighty Mussels, John Vittas. And we welcome him into the show. And again, I apologize for my voice, but let's bring John onto the show and just say thank you so much for joining. And how are things down in Southwest Florida?
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Seth. I appreciate it. It's warm. We've been in the mid 80s all week.
Well, it's warm here in northern Minnesota. I think it's been low to mid 30s most of this week, which is quite the increase from where it was even a week or two ago. So we'll definitely take that.
Yeah, absolutely. Could be worse.
Yeah. So let's start with your current role, John. You're the broadcast, but also media relations person for the Fort Myers Mighty Mussels. Tell us a little bit about you joined the team here about a year ago, and what are you doing now in the off season? I imagine it's probably your busy time.
Yeah, this is a great time of the year. Similar to Sean and Tim, who you had on at the AA and AAA levels, I'm doing mostly corporate sales right now. So selling advertising in the ballpark on the broadcasts, and then working with local companies to get them out to games and work with them on different events. Like they also said, I'm also working on our promotional schedule. We've got a great team here with the Mussels, getting dates set for next year. We're going to have some celebrity appearances, more fireworks, concerts. We're looking at some really exciting things for next year. So that's all in the works. It's odd, when you work in sports to work a 9 to 5, but that's what we're doing right now. And then I'm very busy on the broadcasting front too. I do some play-by-play for Florida Gulf Coast University, which is the D1 school that went to the Sweet 16 back in 2013. I do a lot of their basketball and volleyball, and then same sports for FSW, which is the local junior college, and they've got some incredible facilities down here. So staying busy with some of that, random gigs that pop up on the high school front, and there's a lot of different youth events that happen here in Fort Myers. So it's a busy time of the year on the freelance front, but still working the normal 9 to 5 with the Mussels, getting ready for next season.
So let's go back. I mean, part of what we want to do here, along with just getting to know you a little bit, is trying to understand as a broadcaster what was kind of your path to here. But let's start way back. What are your earliest, fondest memories, not only of baseball but of sports, and either as a player or when you kind of knew that maybe broadcasting was your thing?
Well, unlike a lot of broadcasters in pro ball, I didn't really have dreams of doing it as a kid. I always wanted to be a player, and I always followed all the sports equally. It wasn't until high school that I realized that baseball was my best sport as a player. So I played through high school, got to varsity all 4 years. But the part of broadcasting that really stuck was in high school doing football. I had a TV production class that I took as an elective, and the teacher in that class had a background in sports broadcasting, behind the scenes work for different TV networks. So he ran the local high school football broadcast and asked if I wanted to commentate, and I really didn't, but they kind of roped me into it, and I just kind of ran with it while I was in high school. And a lot of the folks back at home thought I should pursue it, and I didn't know what else I wanted to study, so I started researching broadcasting schools and ended up at the University of Maryland. And then when I was there, obviously being at a big school, there were tons of sports and tons of games to do for student radio. And then they had various TV streams they would do that they would allow students to broadcast. So it really took off while I was in Maryland. But it wasn't until I was 17, 18 that I even had the idea of doing broadcasting long term.
It's early in the show and I already forgot to unmute. But 4 years of varsity, you must have been a pretty decent high school ball player.
Let me rephrase that. 4 years of high school baseball, 1 year starting varsity. But I played all 4 years of high school, and I was a decent player. Maybe could have slid into like the backside of a D3 or junior college roster somewhere. But once I got to junior, senior year, I kind of knew I wanted to go after the broadcasting. So playing became much less of a priority.
Absolutely, I understand that. So you went to Maryland. You were there, and you mentioned that you started the Maryland Baseball Network. What did that entail, and what kind of fight or I guess encouragement did you get to do that?
Yeah, so the student radio had always done the baseball games at Maryland. I think they covered pretty much all the sports, so 15 to 20 different sports. And as you can imagine, at a big school, there were a ton of kids who wanted to call the games. So they would split us up in teams of 8 to 10 broadcasters and assign us to a sport each season. So I would do 3 seasons each school year. So I got lucky to get on the baseball crew as a freshman and then as a sophomore. And then by the time my junior year rolled around, I was the crew chief, and the coaches really wanted me to do more games. But I, was saying, hey, I've got to share the reps with these other 8 kids. So they decided to kind of step outside the box a little bit, and they got some funding for me to go on the road with the team and do all the games. So I kind of worked hand in hand with the coaching staff to form our own platform. It included a website, social media. We developed a pretty nice following, and then I would go on the road with the team and kind of give fans and the parents an inside scoop on what was going on the road, and got to call all the home and road games. I think I missed a couple series that they couldn't get me on the flight for. But other than that, it was really like the full experience of doing baseball on almost an everyday basis. So I did that my senior year, which was our first year in the Big Ten. And we got to go to some Big Ten venues, and then eventually the NCAA tournament. We went all the way to the Super Regional. So that was really me getting a taste of it. And then from there, I really decided that I need to stick with baseball post college as well.
So while you were there, I assume Lamont Wade was one of the guys that was there at that time. Alex Robinson was a former Twins prospect. Any stories on those guys, or were you two in the background at that time?
Yeah, I know those guys really well. So they were there with Brandon Lau as well. And then Kevin Smith, who's a Blue Jays prospect. So you're talking 3 major leaguers in the same lineup for the Terps when I was there. And I was there the exact same years they were. And if you're really a Twins fan, you may remember the name Blake Schmidt, who was also a Twins prospect who was drafted out of Maryland after going to
Minnesota
junior.
native.
Yeah, exactly. So they've had the Twins and the Terps have had a nice little pipeline going. I had a feeling that when Lamont went to San Francisco that he would blossom there. He's just got such an advanced approach and a guy that just loves the game. So I knew he would find a fit in the big leagues, whether it be as a fourth outfielder or as an everyday guy. And he's kind of a little bit of both right now and a really effective player. So I went to college with both those guys. Alex Robinson, same thing, big character. Him and Lamont were pretty close. So to see those Terps in the pros now and a few in the big leagues, it's been a fun journey to kind of go through the ranks with them.
So what was your transition then from college into a profession? Was your time at MLB Network first, or was that during your college years?
Yeah, so I got the MLB Network offer right around the time I graduated. So that was 2015. So I went there for 9 months. I was a graphics producer for them. So I was on the live side rather than the creative side. I'm not much of an artist. So I did the live studio shows, which was a thrill because I got to sit in meeting rooms with Hall of Famers almost every day and hear some really cool inside stories. And so that really fueled the fire for me to continue in baseball. After 6 to 8 months of being in a cold studio, you're so close because you're watching all the games and you're in the thick of it, but you still feel so far because you're not actually at the ballpark. Being in a TV studio, I really felt the itch to get back, into a broadcast booth and be back on the air. So I was fortunate to get the number 2 job with the Myrtle Beach Pelicans. One of my former co-broadcasters at Maryland, Scott Kornberg, brought me in to be his assistant. And then after 1 year with the Cubs organization, I, just kind of perused which teams might have an opening, and I found a fit with the Charlotte Stone Crabs, which was the high A affiliate of the Tampa Bay Rays. So then I was at their spring training complex for 4 years.
Yeah, it's been quite the rise. Obviously, you saw some talented players with the Rays, including one, actually 2 that came to the Twins organization this last summer in the Nelson Cruz trade in July. Drew Strotman ended the season with St. Paul. Joe Ryan got a couple starts with St. Paul and then jumped right up to the Twins, and obviously was very, very impressive after his Olympic great impression there. So your thoughts on those guys? Did you have a chance to work with them at all with Charlotte or in the spring training timeline?
Yeah, I got to know those guys really well. Those were two of my favorites on the 2019 Stone Crabs team. That was the year Joe Ryan broke out. He had just been drafted the year before and was a completely off the radar guy, and had one of the best stat lines in minor league baseball by the end of the year between three different levels. He started in low A. I actually was the one that picked him up from the airport when he got promoted to the Stone Crabs. It's actually the Fort Myers airport. So got to know him really well through that, and then he was on our team as our ace for 3 months, and put together probably the best pitching season I've ever seen in the minor leagues. Was just absolutely dominant, a great guy to be around, very talkative. He was a deep thinker. He loved the game. He's got an incredible background as a runner and a surfer, and he used to camp in the mountains and run half marathons with his dad. And it's just an incredible story. I ended up writing a really long feature on Joe because his dad contributed and did a really nice interview with me. And so it ended up coming together nicely where I got to put that out and kind of gain some buzz because we do the media relations side as broadcasters in the minor leagues as well. So I got to kind of promote him a little bit, and obviously he was all for it. So it worked out great. And so Joe and I got to, learn a lot about each other during that season. And then Drew came to us later in the season because he was coming off Tommy John surgery, and was a little bit on the radar. I think he was at the very tail end of the Rays top 30 before he got hurt. So it was a little higher profile than Joe, but not by much. And he came in and made a handful of, unofficial rehab starts for us at the end of the year. Fastball was sitting 94, 95. So I figured he would be something down the road. And another guy like Joe, who was a very hard worker, a guy who loves the game of baseball and wanted to work hard. So I figured that both those guys would find themselves, at the big league level one day, and I'm sure Drew will get there soon. And two guys that Twins fans should be excited about because not only are they really good pitchers, they're awesome people. If you ever get them on the show, great interviews, and they're true baseball guys. So I think they'll fit nicely in that Twins rotation together one day.
Twice already in the first 12 minutes, I've forgotten the mic. But yeah, if you want to help out, get those guys in on a podcast, that'd be fantastic. First of all, we're talking with John Vittas. He's the Mighty Mussels of Fort Myers, their broadcaster and media relations person. Getting to know him, he spent some time with the Rays, with the Cubs, on MLB Network, and now he's with the Twins organization. If you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, please feel free to participate by sending in a question about his career or about any Twins prospects that you saw playing in Fort Myers this last year. One other quick reminder, this podcast will be available on the Twins Daily podcast, which you can download wherever you get your podcasts from shortly after this show is complete. So let's continue then. Obviously, another guy with the Rays that's pretty exciting. I saw him in spring training, got a few pictures of him. Wander Franco, what an impression he made this year. But he's been at the top of prospect lists, radars, really since he was since he signed. Man, he couldn't have come through any bigger, and now he's a rich man.
Yeah, I was so happy to see the extension that he came to with the Rays. I thought it was a really fair deal on both sides. He was incredible. I got to broadcast his games for half a season in 2019, so I think I saw him for about 65 games, and boy, was that fun to watch. I mean, I love the scouting side of the game, and they throw out 80 hit tool for Wander Franco, and that's it. Like, there's no other player I've seen that even comes close to just squaring up balls on a regular basis. It was basically line drives every time up, and if he didn't square a ball up, he probably drew a walk or found a way to get on base one way or another. He was fun to watch defensively, and he had the youthful enthusiasm that you don't see a ton of at the higher levels of the minors, just because those guys have been through the grind 4, 5, 6 times. So he was going through it for the first time, and he knew he was going to be a star. And so he came in there as an 18-year-old, and sometimes he acted like an 18-year-old, but it was refreshing for everybody else there to have that sort of enthusiasm and love for the game, because he was just so much fun to watch. And we were lucky to have him for the games we did, because if the season was any longer, he would have been in Double A, sooner rather than later. So that was special to watch. I had the privilege of coordinating all the interview requests that he garnered, which was a lot. So a lot of people wanted to talk to him. I got to sit in on some English classes with him. The Rays did a good job teaching all the Latin players English, and so we tried to prepare him the best we could for the interviews that we knew he would have very, very soon. So it was fun to be around him and some of the other guys on that team. We had a rotation that year that for about 2/3 of the season posted a 1.4 ERA. I mean, it was dominant. We were playing 2 hours and 20-minute games every night. It was a fun season that year, and obviously Wander was a big part of it.
So let's talk briefly about your transition then from the Rays organization to the Twins organization. Obviously, Marshall Kellner did a great job with Fort Myers in his time there, and then came the pandemic, which affected so many teams and organizations and people. What was your transition like to the to the Mighty Mussels by then?
Yeah, it was. I feel very fortunate to be here right now because at the end of or I should say in the middle of 2020, obviously we started to come to the realization that there wouldn't be a minor league season. So the Rays and the Stone Crabs, gradually let everybody go, whether it was furloughs or for real. I was seasonal there. So when there was no season, there was no need for me to be on the payroll anymore. So I ended up working in apartment sales for about 8 months, waiting for the world to recover and for minor league baseball to be back. And then I got really lucky that I got a call one day from these guys over here at the Twins complex, the guys that I had gotten to know a little bit as the visiting broadcaster here in Fort Myers. So during those long rain delays, those conversations really paid dividends down the road. And they offered me the position after Marshall had decided to go to law school, and he's trying to become a sports agent now. So I have no doubt he's a really gifted guy. So I have no doubt that he'll be a major league agent one day. So I look forward to seeing that. But yeah, he left an opening here, and I just happened to be in Fort Myers already, doing the games for FGCU and the colleges. So it couldn't have worked out any better for me.
Real briefly, before we get to that 2021 Mighty Mussels team and roster, what are for you the challenges or what you enjoy about doing baseball, but also about the other sports, about basketball? You said you did volleyball and other things too. What's the challenge between sports?
I think I've done like 14 sports now. So I've done a lot of different games. Nowadays, it's mostly baseball, basketball, and volleyball. I've developed a really strong passion for volleyball because both the college teams down here are tremendous. They win their conference pretty much every year now. But I enjoy the storytelling of baseball. Baseball is my favorite sport. So being on the air for 100+ games every year is just a joy for me to be able to talk baseball and talk about the team that I know the most about on a daily basis. It's the best. But from when you get to go to those basketball and volleyball games, the faster pace is probably the best part. You're not telling stories anymore. You're trying to keep up with the ball in play. So you get to, yell a little bit more. You get to, it's faster paced, and there's less commercial breaks. And so it's fun to jump in there for a quick 2-hour window, like with baseball. It's a 12 to 14-hour day. You're setting up the equipment. You're setting up the pre and post game show. You're writing the recap. You're doing all those other things aside from the on-air experience. So I like just showing up an hour before the game at the college level, calling the game, getting to go home without having to pack up the equipment. And it gets your adrenaline going, and then you get out of there. So it's I really do enjoy the freelance side of it.
Absolutely. All right. Again, John Vittas. He was the radio voice of the Fort Myers Mighty Mussels in 2021. And I was just looking. There were 29 different hitters that played for the Mighty Mussels last year, and 41 pitchers threw at least one pitch. Now, I think that includes, Daniel Osoria and maybe a couple other position players. But that has to be the challenge of playing and broadcasting in Fort Myers, because not only is it an affiliate where there will be the natural transactions, but because the complex is literally right across the parking lot, it's even easier to make transactions on a daily basis. So was that one of the bigger challenges as far as broadcasting this year?
Yeah, it was a challenge. I also enjoyed seeing more players. The more you see, the better you feel like you understand the organization. I found myself so much more interested in the Florida Complex League games than I had ever had a level of interest with the Rays, because when I was with the Rays, the GCL team was 3 levels below us. Now that we're low A here in Florida and there's no short seasons anymore, they're the level directly below us. So their players are coming straight to us. So I found myself, if I had a 30 minutes or 60 minutes to burn, walking over to the complex and watching some of those 12 o'clock games in the heat of the day with those younger guys who are on their way up to our team. And it was fun to keep track of them and then see some of those guys end up with us. And then we got some of the draft picks mid-season, which I'd never experienced, getting guys just weeks after they were drafted straight from college. Those guys have a little extra energy inside of them because they're in pro ball for the first time. So there were a lot of players. I had roster moves to make almost every day, but it was fun to see different guys funnel in and out. And I think when that July-August part of the schedule rolled around, we hit a little lull at the end of July before the draft picks got here. Once the draft picks got here, you started to sense that survival of the fittest mode that guys would go into, knowing that they had the clear roster spots for the draft picks, knowing that it was time to perform or your days were numbered. And so that got really, I don't want to say exciting because you hate to see guys go, but it got a lot more entertaining, I guess you can say, on a daily basis to see guys really push themselves. And then with those guys coming up, some of our guys got promoted to high A too. So there were some nice promotions around that time of the year.
And it's understandable. These guys are all very early in their pro careers, and they have been in that Florida complex in Fort Myers, which is very nice, but they've been doing the same thing pretty much every day since February or March. So I'm sure that, influx of talent and competition is definitely a good thing. Now, I'm listening to you talk about this, and it reminds me of going down to spring training, and I love spending time down on the backfields with the minor leaguers. But for you, like you said, these are the guys that you're going to see. So, you saw both top prospects and guys that maybe came from independent ball. You've seen kind of a range of talent, and then compared to your time with the Rays too. I want to start with pitching because obviously we know pitching is the thing that the Twins need the most. Every team needs the most. And the Derek Falvey regime of the Twins, they're kind of touted as he came from Cleveland, and Cleveland has this pipeline that they've developed, and it really seems like you got to see some of that in 2021. And I'm thinking, guys like I'm going to forget some, but obviously Cantorino, who would have skipped there but ended up on a couple of on a rehab game. But Sawyer Gibson Long, Louis Varland, Casey Legumina. I think Hunter McMahon will fit into that when healthy. Sean Mooney. Who are some of the guys that you kind of feel are guys that Twins fans, from a pitching standpoint, should be watching, not only in 2022, but really going forward?
Yeah, you named a lot of the best ones. I was the visiting broadcaster here in Fort Myers for 20 games a year or so. We were when I was with the Rays, the Miracle, they were our top rival. So I was here all the time. So some of those upper level guys I've seen in person, and I think they're outstanding. Obviously, I know Joe Ryan, and I believe Andrew Strotman will be major league starters. But to me, one of the most impressive arms I've ever seen is Joan Duran, who was hurt for most of last year. I think he's got electric stuff. He's got that splitter that you don't see a lot in guys' arsenals, especially guys who throw 100. So I think he's special. I saw him and Brusdar Graterol go back to back, and I thought Duran was the better pitcher of the two. So I think him and Jordan Belazovic can both be, number 2, number 3 type starters when healthy and when they put it all together. We actually saw both Matt Cantorino and Chris Valamont make rehab starts for us, and I thought both of them had major league caliber stuff. And then when you factor in that both of them have, command, I would say Cantorino has plus command. When you put those two things together, those guys can be major league starters without a doubt. I haven't seen him in person, but I've heard great things about Cole Sands. And then guys that we saw this year that I think have a chance to be major league starters. I could talk forever about Louis Varland. He's a personal favorite of mine just because he attacks the strike zone with so much aggressiveness, sits in the mid-90s. He's a Minnesota guy, really good slider, working on a changeup. The pieces are there. The mindset is there for Louis to be a legitimate major league starter one day. And then you mentioned Sawyer Gibson Long. He looks the part. He's, 6'4", strong, fit guy, works really, really hard, sits in the mid 90s, just like Varland. When he gets more run on the fastball, he's really effective. The fastball can straighten out and get hit hard at times, but the slider is a wipeout pitch. It might even be better than Varland's slider, and Varland's slider is really, really good. They're right up there as two of the better sliders I saw all year last season. So I think both of those guys can be major league starters. The other guys you named, same thing. I think Hunter McMahon's got potential. Even Reggie Grace has major league potential. Legumina has one of the livest arms in the farm system. And then if you really want to go further down the radar for potential sleepers, I know the Twins re-signed Bobby Malachy to a minor league deal. He throws 97 and has a very interesting array of off-speed pitches. I don't know if they'll re-sign him, but Aaron Rosick is a guy who bounced around between AA and our level, and he has plus command, and his velocity ticked up to 91, 92 at the end of the year, and he's a lefty. So those guys are a little older, probably not going to be on any prospect list, but all of those guys flashed major league potential at times throughout the year.
And you mentioned Rosick he's another Minnesota guy, came from the independent leagues. So I think he actually just is in the organization. I don't think they have to re-sign him at this point. One guy that I had on the show 2-3 weeks ago was one of those 2021 draft picks, Cade Povich. And first of all, he was a very impressive guest, but when talking to you previously, it sounds like he's got a pretty good arsenal too.
Yeah, I completely forgot him with the last question, but he probably should have been the headliner of that question. A lot of the scouts came up to me the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season, even into Instructs, and they were like, who is this kid and where did he come from? Some of them weren't aware of his prowess at Nebraska, but he is a big, tall, strong left-hander who can really locate. He's got good off-speed pitches, but his velocity kind of would go up and down, at least from the reports I read in college, where he would be 91 one start and 88 the next. He got to us here in Fort Myers and was 91 to 94 with ease, and he throws from a kind of a crossfire delivery. He hides the ball well, and so when you factor in that desire to get better and the mix of pitches he has, there's no reason he can't be a big league starter. The draft class as a whole, and I haven't seen Steve Hadger yet, but I've heard similar things about him and Povich. It seems like the Twins hit on almost all of their early draft picks, or at least the ones that I've seen, because they gave us quite a lift over the last month or so of the season.
Well, I just look at this draft strategy, which has been to take a lot of athletic, talented hitters early and then fill around, say, 2 or 3 through 10 with college pitchers who either have stuff, size, or something, spin or velocity, and see what they can do to develop them. And it's the same strategy, I think, that they used with Cleveland. You didn't see Cleveland sign a whole bunch of high-cost players either. In free agency, they drafted college guys. So I think the philosophy's there. Now we'll just see how it works over time. One more pitcher I did want to mention, I guess by name, is a guy that you saw, and I think he got promoted up to Cedar Rapids late in the year, maybe for their playoff run. When healthy, Sean Mooney put up some absolutely crazy numbers. And I just saw this in 29 innings, he had 52 strikeouts. That's pretty good coming off of Tommy John.
Yeah, Sean had a really interesting year. He's one of the more higher IQ guys that understands baseball really well. He changed his entire delivery over the course of the season. At St. John's, he was one of the best starting pitchers in the nation at the D1 level. But he got hurt early in the season with us, and when he was rehabbing, he basically retooled his whole delivery. So he's strictly out of the stretch now. Lower arm slot, again, a great slider. I think that's where a lot of the high strikeout numbers come from with our starting pitchers, whether it be Gibson, Long, or Varland and Mooney for sure. Most of his strikeouts came on sliders because his fastball is 90 to 93. He'll touch a 4 or a 5 every once in a while. But yeah, I think he's got the pitchability and the track record to be a starter. But with his arsenal now, I would see him more as like a fast moving reliever just because he's changed that whole mentality, the whole way he throws the baseball. I'm sure he's going to work really hard in the offseason to perfect that new delivery. But yeah, he's definitely an interesting guy.
Yeah, certainly. And again, that's what you're looking for. You mentioned Varland, you mentioned Gibson Long, you mentioned their sliders. And right now, their fastball slider guys working on their third or fourth pitches. And as we all know, pitching prospects are not, say, a science. It's humans trying to take to the next level. And they always say, unless you get that third pitch, the bullpen's an option. But with both of those guys as an example, and you just mentioned Mooney, when you throw 96, 97 with a wipeout slider, the fallback plan of potentially being a strong late inning reliever isn't a bad thing either. So, I mean, I feel like they're doing a lot of the right things, and you talked about it, not only getting good, talented pitchers and arms, but guys that you as a media person enjoy having around too.
Yeah, it's fun to watch those guys develop because they obviously get drafted for a reason. They usually have like two or three tools that are major league caliber or can be, and then they try and develop one or two others. And yeah, I would say with Sean, he's actually more of a complete product. Mooney's got 4 pitches. He's got a 12-6 curveball that he mixes in as well. The reason I kind of mentioned the reliever is because he's strictly out of the stretch and he kind of has a lower arm angle now. Varland, I think, is a perfect example of a guy who could be a major league starter, but if he ends up becoming a 7th or 8th inning reliever, he could be extremely valuable with just those 2 pitches. Gibson Long, to me, is more of a true starter, even though he is only like a 2.5 pitch guy. That changeup really came a long way this year, and because of how big and durable he is, he seemed to get stronger and stronger as the season went, to the point where his velocity actually went up. So if I had to profile guys, I would say that Mooney looks more like a reliever now and Gibson Long looks more like a starter, but a lot probably depends on, how they pitch this year and in the years to come.
Yeah, and of course, if those guys you talked about at the upper levels, the Durans, the Balazovic, Sands, Ryan Strotman, I mean, we're naming Valamont, all these names that, we all hope they all become great, but, we also know that isn't always how it plays out. You mentioned some relievers. I wanted to just mention a few by name and try to respect your time and understand that. I kind of just want to throw some names at you and then get your thoughts. And did I miss someone that you consider a sleeper? And I'm going to intentionally leave one out that I know you like a lot, but I want to mention 3 others first. So Denny Bentley came out of a junior college or a 2-year program and really came on, I thought, this year as a late inning left-handed reliever. Curious about what he throws. Osiris Herman, I guess, is known for his changeup and a decent fastball, and he's certainly put up terrific numbers even after he got promoted to Cedar Rapids. And then I know Bradley Hanner and whose name am I going to mention? Matthew Swain. 2 guys that were part of the no-hitter that you called late in the season, but also 2 guys that just throw really hard out of the bullpen. So again, I intentionally left one name out there that I know you're really high on, and I can see you smiling just thinking about that. But your thoughts on the guys I mentioned or other guys that I missed?
Yeah, those are the guys we saw a lot of. Like, they were with us the whole year. Brad Hanner's got a hammer curveball and he sits 92 to 95. So there's definitely something to work with there. All those guys you mentioned have one thing that really stands out about them that makes them better than your average single A reliever. With Brad, it's the curveball. With Swain, it's the strike throwing ability and the heaviness to his fastball. He's got a pretty good slider and changeup too, so he's a 3-pitch guy. Fills up the zone. I would imagine he'll be a massive part of the Cedar Rapids bullpen in 2022. And then Herman might be the most interesting of the mix just because he has this unusual pitch that I've never seen before. For the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, I was calling it a curveball on the broadcast because it had straight 12 to 6 action straight down. It was heavy. Guys couldn't touch it. And if they did touch it, the best they could do was trickle a foul ball to the backstop. And that was about it. So it was a true swing and miss pitch. And our pitching coaches were having him throw that 80 to 90% of the time. And his fastball was 92 to 94. So I was, wondering, what pitch is that and why are you throwing it so much? But I learned that it's actually gripped as a circle changeup, and he has such big fingers, and the way he's able to pronate the ball makes it look like a 12-6 curveball. He gets so much downward action on that pitch that it looks like a curveball, but it actually is a circle changeup. And our pitching coaches worked on a true breaking ball with him too. So it really looked like he was throwing one pitch. He really has three pitches, but he's a guy where if he can somehow land that pitch for strikes when guys don't swing at it, because that became the pitch that nobody would swing at over the course of the season, was that pitch from Osiris Herman. If he can throw it for strikes when guys aren't swinging, I mean, there's no reason he can't be in the big leagues one day. And then Denny Bentley, he's a strike thrower. He comes right at you. He's got a good breaking ball. Fastball was up to 94 over the course of the season. So I think Denny and Matt, who are with us, a little older for the level, but they were both with us last year and were extremely valuable to our success in the second half. I think they'll be just as valuable to the success of the Cedar Rapids team this year. And then was the other guy you were thinking of, Steven Cruz?
Absolutely.
No, he raised a ton of eyebrows this year because I guess during the pandemic he put on some weight, like good weight, and added a ton of velocity. So he sat 96 to 101 over the course of the season. He popped a lot of hundreds, a ton of 99s. And he had, over the course of the year, a changeup develop that almost looked like a splitter. And he can throw a slider for strikes as well. So even just, again, fastball slider was more than good enough to get guys out at this level when he would throw strikes. But then the development of that changeup made him even more scary. So I think all of those guys are worth tracking this year as they go to Cedar Rapids and beyond.
Honestly, the big part is just we had a year of games again, and then kind of now we can get back to what's that natural progression and how many go up and succeed and how they develop, and that's the fun part. So again, we are joined by John Vittas. He is the voice, the radio voice broadcaster of the Fort Myers Mighty Mussels. Whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter on Twins Daily's accounts, please feel free to participate if you've got questions. Just a few more minutes here left with him, and then we'll let him get back to work. Although you've got the shirt on, I think you're doing like promotion, so this has to count as work, right?
I would say so. Yep.
Absolutely. So let's talk about a few hitters, and I think the first ones we should talk about aren't necessarily guys that broke out this year, but are the guys that are the top prospects. So first of all, Aaron Sabato. Everyone talked about his struggles early in the year. A lot of it was just timing and things like that. Also, he's a very patient hitter. Maybe early in the year bordering on passive, but also the electronic strike zone had to play into him and overthinking maybe too. But later in the year, he got things going a little bit. And I don't know if it's fair to say, were you surprised with how well he did once he moved up to Cedar Rapids, or did you kind of see that kind of talent was there?
Oh, the power is so evident. In batting practice, he puts on a show. So I thought he would continue to hit for power up in CR, but he hit for a ton of power once he got called up. This league is so tough on hitters. The day-to-day grind in 100-plus-degree heat with so much humidity wears guys down over the course of a year. And I don't think that actually happened with Aaron because he got himself into great shape by the end of the year. But just in general, the parks in this league, the way the air is, the way the pitchers are, it's just not a league where you're going to put up offensive numbers. It's really hard to put up big offensive numbers for a full season in this league. So really your best bet is hope you get hot for a month or two and then get called up. And that's basically what happened for Aaron in the second half of the season. The first half was a struggle. He would tell you that, swung through a lot of pitches. But like you said, Seth, his plate discipline, his idea of the strike zone is unbelievable. He rarely chases. And he might take a borderline pitch or two that maybe other guys would swing at, but is probably to his advantage to do that. And he works a ton of deep counts, so he will wear down the other team's pitcher. But he had a lot of work to do. He was missing a lot of pitches that he probably should have squared up, but he put in the work. I mean, he was here almost every off day. He was probably in the cage as much as anybody on the team. And he did what he had to do to be successful at this level. And then he got the opportunity to go up, and he really mashed for the Colonels going into that postseason run for them. So I think he made some major, major positive strides over the course of the year here. And it was impressive to watch a guy, actively dig himself out of a hole over the course of the year.
Very well said. Another first round pick that was with you, and maybe almost a surprise early in the year. I was surprised, but obviously they want him to play, and that's Kaoni Kovaco. Of all the players in the minor league system who were probably hurt most by a missed 2020 season, I think Kovaco has to rank right up there. So to me, it's not so much about the numbers that he put up. 230. His on base percentage was just under 30%. Not a lot of power, which again, you're not going to necessarily see in that league anyway. Defense, you hear the good and the bad. How would you evaluate his season? I mean, certainly not a guy anyone's going to give up on anytime soon.
Yeah, it was a tough year for Kaoni. I think if you're him going into next year, you just take 2021, you crumble it up, and you throw it in the garbage. Because it was a tough year. He dealt with injuries. He had multiple injuries during the season. He had a freak concussion on the road where he got hit with a throw while he was running the bases. He got hit in the head again late in the season. He had some soft tissue stuff going on. So I mean, it was just the kind of year where he never got to get going. He had some flashes where you were like, "Oh, that's a first round pick. That's a potential major league shortstop." So it's in there for him. There's no doubt he can meet his potential down the road. And he showed us some really nice glimpses. I mean, he had a rocket home run here in the first home game of the year. He's got a huge arm. He definitely can play the infield at a high level. He had some blips. He committed some errors that I think down the road become routine plays for him. So I think he had to learn what the grind was all about this year. It was the first time he had to go through it. So I think between that and having to go back down to the FCL to rehab and then try and restart again while his buddies and his teammates were 80 games in and he was at game 30, I think was frustrating. And I think this is a complete learning experience year for him. And I think not coming to the complex in the fall and the winter for the mini camps that he came for in 2020 is going to help him clear his head. I know he's got great people he works out with out in California who are going to keep him in great shape. So I would look forward to much better things for him next year.
No, I feel like there were lots of pitchers that we could talk about, and there's some obvious hitters, maybe not as many. But I wanted to talk a little bit. You mentioned about the plate discipline shown by Sabato. I mean, I think he was second in the minor leagues in walks taken, behind only Edouard Julien, who led minor league baseball in walks. And you got to see not only almost a 500 on base percentage, but a little bit of power and a bunch of speed, which isn't necessarily something he showed at Auburn. Now he went up to Cedar Rapids, continued to take walks, struggled a little bit as you would expect. I mean, last year was his pro debut after missing the year before with Tommy John. And when he went to Cedar Rapids again, that power showed a little bit more, which again, Florida versus Iowa. So, I mean, you had a half a season, maybe a little bit more than a half a season of watching him. What were some of your general thoughts? And I guess the one question I'd still have with him would be really defensively. Is he good enough to play a position at any spot? Or is he going to be like Luis Ariz? And I mean this in a good way. He can play a bunch of positions all right, even if none of them great, and might be best in that type of a role.
Yeah, great questions. For Eddie Julian, if I had, and I'll start with this, out of all the hitters we had, if I had to put money on one guy to at least make the major leagues first out of our group of guys, I would pick him. Because it's such an advanced approach at the plate. He never chases. He waits for his pitch. If he's up in the count, and he gets a pitch on the corner of the plate, he'll take it and wait for a better pitch. And then when he gets his pitch, he knows what to do with it. He works deep counts. He's a polished hitter. He goes to all fields. He's a line drive guy with natural power and, like you said, some speed too. So to me, he was the most advanced hitter we had this year. In terms of defensively, it's not going to be his calling card. He's a bat first guy for sure. But he was more than adequate. The guy who I'll compare him to, who I saw for a lot of time when I was with the Rays, is Brandon Lau. I think him and Julian are a really good comparison. Brandon had a ton of knocks on his defensive ability coming through Maryland with me and then with the Rays as well. People didn't think he was good enough to play even second base on an everyday basis. To me, and I thought Eddie was fine. He was fine at every position he played. He played mostly second base and left field, but he can play third base too. His arm is good enough to play those positions. But to me, and this is something that I don't think people talk about enough, scouts are overanalyzing because they see so many players, and so they'll try and find flaws in guys' games. So with Brandon and with Julian, I think they see a modest arm, or they see a little less foot speed or agility, and they say, oh, he's a DH, or he might not be able to play a certain position. Those guys have played enough baseball. They're both baseball rats. Those two guys, where when you get to the big leagues, you're on the grand stage, that the people are watching every pitch. You just focus a little harder and you make the plays you're supposed to make, and nobody's going to bat an eye at his level of defense. So it's a long way of saying I think he's totally fine defensively wherever they put him. But I thought the way that they approached at bats and the way that they sprayed balls to all fields with authority, I saw a lot of similarities between Lau and Julian.
I mean, that's a pretty good comp from a pretty good player. So, we got about maybe 10 minutes tops with here, John, with you. But and as we're talking, I'm really hoping that even during the season, maybe we can do something like this once a month, with each of the affiliates, because I think it's a lot of fun, and I think people will enjoy hearing these thoughts too. I think I enjoy talking catchers. And I think Charles Mack showed some improvement over the course of the year. I thought it was very cool that the Twins let him go to the Major League draft in Denver so that he could be there with his brother, who was taken in the first round, and the family. Actually, it gave him a chance to meet Chase Petty, too. So that's pretty cool. And you saw Pat Winkle at the end of the year. He was a draft pick this year. I'm trying to think through other catchers you might have seen that remain in the organization. I know Kyle Schmidt's defense first catcher, which has a ton of value. I mean, ask Drew Butera and guys like that. So what are your thoughts on the catchers and maybe those two specifically?
Yeah, well, Charlie can hit. His numbers didn't show it early in the season, but late in the season, he caught fire. He goes to all fields. He put on some good weight during the season. Most guys will lose 20 pounds in this league because of the heat. He was able to maintain his weight and add some muscle, and we talked about that a little bit at the end of the season on our pregame show. And so he hit most of his home runs were to the opposite field, which always impresses me when a guy 22 or younger can do that in these major league parks. So he can hit. His defense is coming along. He's putting a ton of work in. It's getting better. Still some work to do. He became a better blocker, I think, over the course of the year. But yeah, there's definitely some work to do with Charlie defensively, and he's putting in the necessary hours to get better. I really like Pat Winkle. The glimpse I saw of him, it's a sweet lefty swing. But what stands out about him the most is he is a massive personality. I mean, he's one of the most likable, funny guys that you can ever come across. And I think as a catcher, I think that serves you pretty well, especially when you have the game to go with it. I mean, he's got a really strong arm. We saw a little bit of that, but they kind of limited him because he's coming back from Tommy John. But when he did get the chance to throw behind the plate, he's got a strong arm. And I think there's a ton of offensive upside with Pat. The one you didn't ask about that I'll go ahead and throw in there is Jefferson Morales. Who was our right fielder for most of the season, but he also could catch. He would catch 1 or 2 games a week. And again, work in progress defensively. He's got some of the tools to be good back there. But his bat is awesome. And just like Pat, his personality is off the charts. He was, I think, Brian Meyer, our manager, said one of our reporters asked him at the end of the year, what were your 3 highlights of the season? And number 1 was the promotion of Jefferson Morales, because he got very emotional. He's got a young son who he adores. And so for him to get the call, just a high A, meant the world to him. He's one of those guys that will smile and give you a hug no matter what the situation, and just a great guy to be around. That over 120 plus games, you need guys like that to, avoid dipping into those emotional lows that the season can include. So he was awesome. He's a guy that probably won't be on any top 30 list, but a legitimate potential bat in the big leagues one day. He's one of those guys that's going to have to earn it at every level. He's going to have to prove that he can hit at every level, but I think he can.
Yeah, I saw his name there as I finished and realized I wanted to ask about him. Okay, I want to ask you about the 2021 draft picks. We talked about Winkle, but you also saw Christian Encarnacion Strand, who, I think he started out with 15-game hitting streak and some power, Kyle Fedko came up right away. Who am I forgetting? Mikey Perez did late, although he did great when he was there. And Jake Rucker, 7th-round pick. Along with those four and Winkle, you also got 2020 2nd-round pick Alaric Soulere, who got hurt in spring training. Otherwise, he would have spent most of if maybe the whole year there. He might have been a guy who had a chance to move up with Sabato to Cedar Rapids too. So again, an influx of talent there late in the season, I think really helped the team. But those are some interesting bats too.
Yeah, those guys are all interesting. Those guys are all prospects for sure. I think the draft picks that you mentioned were all good selections by the Twins. I think they're going to really climb the ladder at a good rate. Out of that list, obviously, Solari is a guy who had to deal with major injuries, and he fought his way back onto the roster to give himself more than a month of reps before the season ended. Really toolsy, good speed, sneaky power, can play multiple positions. I think Solari is definitely a guy to keep an eye on. But if you look at the numbers, the one guy that's going to jump out, in a small sample size is Encarnacion Strand. The cool part about his story is he played at a junior college and then eventually at Oklahoma State, where his coaches were Robin Ventura and Matt Holliday. So he got to learn from two really good big league hitters, one of which managed in the major leagues as well. And so he talked a lot about how those guys helped him as a hitter. He was already a great hitter before he got there, but they took him to another level. And when he came here, he just continued to mash OPS over 1,000 in his first month plus in a pitcher-friendly league. So he's a guy who can play both corner infield spots, third and first, and just mashes. He's one of those hard-nosed kids that I have a feeling is going to put up big numbers wherever he's at. And, one day I think he could start for the Twins. I think he's one of those guys.
And again, I could talk about or listen to the stuff about these guys. I think for me, Jesus Feliz is a sleeper. I've been high on Willie Joe Gary. I know that he had a tough year this year, ended strong. I just think he's got great tools and great personality. And Misael Urbina, I don't know if I completely said his first name right, but such a young guy for that level, but held his own, I thought. I mean, yeah, he hit 198 or something, 191, but he seemed to take decent at bats. So not necessarily overwhelmed. Are there other guys, that kind of were sleepers for you? Junior Severino didn't do great with Fort Myers, did tremendous when he went up to Cedar Rapids. So, I mean, you got to see the gamut of prospect this year.
Yeah, it was a fun year because, like you said, we saw so many names, and all of these guys you're mentioning all have a chance to be in the majors one day. Obviously, not all of them will get there, but I think a good amount will. We didn't talk about Will Holland. He's super toolsy. I think he has a chance to be a really valuable, not a knock, but a utility guy one day because I think he can play every single position on the field. And then Severino, I think, needs a lot more attention than he's getting. After Julian, he would be my next biggest quote unquote sleeper. And the only reason he's a sleeper is because he was ranked so high as a teenager that he dropped down the lists. But in terms of offensive potential, he's right at the top of the list because he still crushes balls. He's a switch hitter that, destroys balls from both sides of the plate. And he posed there. I mean, there were a bunch of games before his promotion. We're lucky in this league being at the major league stadiums. We get the TrackMan data on public information for all of our games. So at the end of every game, I'll go look at the exit velocities from that game and see who hit the ball the hardest. And you want to see if your eyes match what the data says. And most of the time it does. I mean, there were games before he got promoted where, and it includes foul balls, but 7 of the 10 hardest hit balls that night were all from Junior Severino. So, I mean, he really has the chance to impact the ball. He's one of those guys where it's about his approach. If he doesn't chase, he's going to be almost impossible to get out. If guys who don't throw as hard or guys that, hang a breaking ball, they're going to get punished when he's at the plate. So he's definitely one that deserves more interest. A lot of people started getting on the Jesus Feliz bandwagon over the course of the year. He's a guy that has a ton of power and can play all 4 infield positions. So he's definitely a potential breakout name for 2022. And then you mentioned Urbina. I think he was a product of a teenage guy who almost got too many at-bats this year. He played every day. He hit leadoff for us for most of the season. As he gets older and matures, he's going to bring a much more consistent approach to the plate. But the bat to ball skills are undeniable. He gets the ball in the barrel as much as anybody. And so as he continues to grow and get stronger and, focus on an everyday basis a little bit better, he's going to be an interesting guy to watch too. So like you said, it sounds like we like all these guys. We see the pros and the cons, but the pros when they're so young outweigh the cons because you have so much time to work on those weaknesses.
Did it again, only 3 times so far. I've forgotten to hit the mic on. But for me, that's why it's so important. If I'm going to write about these guys, I think it's important that I get down to Fort Myers for spring training and spend 4 or 5 days watching them. And that's not enough by any means, but that's also why I enjoy talking to you or the other announcers that get to be around these guys throughout the year, because that's, valuable information that you're not just seeing a couple of bad days or a couple of great days. You're seeing the whole picture. Real quick, I wanted to ask you, you made the comment early about getting down to the backfields, the complex, maybe some of the FCL games. Were there some guys that stood out to you at there that maybe you're looking forward to seeing either 2022 or, maybe they're a little further out, but I mean, the name that comes to me and I hear a lot about just from talking to people in the organization is Emmanuel Rodriguez. But there's other guys at that level that, I mean, Carlos Aguiar was a guy that for me, when I saw him in spring training 2020, jumped out. Wander Valdez jumped out at that time. I know he didn't do a lot with the Mighty Mussels this year, but showed some power in the FCL. And I'm rambling again. You saw Instructs, you saw the FCL, you saw just complex days. Again, are there just some guys that you saw through all of that are guys you're interested in watching this next year?
Yeah, so with the complex, and this year I'm excited because I'll get to see spring training for the first time in 2-3 years to go see some of the backfield games. But all those guys you mentioned are legitimate names. I see snippets, so I'll go back there and watch 2 or 3 innings. So I'm not exactly an expert on those guys, but you also talk to a lot of people here at the complex, and everybody's kind of got their favorite players that they like to talk about. I think Kalai Rosario developed a pretty big following this year. I think a lot of Twins folks really like the way he swung the bat this year. Rodriguez is definitely, the toolsy hot name. I think, he's one of those guys that there's certain moments where he crushes balls where it makes you fall out of your chair kind of power. He hit 10 home runs in, I think, less than 30 games. So he's definitely a name. I was really impressed with Noah Miller, who was the first round pick this year. I happened to go to the game where he went 4 for 4, or it might have been 5 for 5. So I got to see him log hits from both sides of the plate, and he's just a line drive guy who plays a really good shortstop and seems like a gamer. So I always love guys like that. So I'm sure he'll be on our team this year, and we'll see some great stuff from him. But in Instructs, there were a couple of arms that jumped out. I didn't get to watch all of Instructs, but I did see some snippets. Marco Raya looked fantastic. He was mid-90s, and I thought he was great. And then the other name that's completely, probably foreign to Twins fans would be Jalen Nowlin, I believe is how you say it. Really exciting. Yeah, really exciting. He was a junior college draft pick who was mid-90s or more low to mid-90s from the left side with a good breaking ball. So those were just some guys who I saw here just a couple months ago that I think you ought to, be aware of.
Absolutely. And I better be aware of the time as it's past 1 o'clock here in the Central Time. You're out east, little shorter, not a shorter day, but your day ends sooner than ours. So I better let you get back to work. I better get back to work. But it's been a ton of fun talking to you, John. And like I said, I hope we can do this throughout the season. I'm hoping to get down to Fort Myers for spring training for a week or so again, and hopefully we can walk through the backfields every once in a while together and maybe talk about more of your role as it relates to the Twins and spring training and all of that. But might as well leave a little bit meat on the bone for future conversations. So thanks again to you, and happy holidays to you and your family.
Thank you, Seth. You too. And I appreciate your guys' coverage too, because it's about as good as the fans are going to get regarding the minor leagues. So appreciate all the love over the course of the year.
All right. Well, thank you again, John. And again, thanks everyone for listening. Again, this will be on the Twins Daily podcast shortly after we're done here. And the video will be on Twins Daily's video page shortly as well. So with that, we'll be back, I believe, tomorrow with another guest, a player, and we'll announce that as soon as we get final confirmation. But again, any feedback or comments, please let me know. Thank you very much. Have yourselves a great day. Go Twins and go Mighty Mussels.